Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast. Today, we're joined by Randall Jackson, the CISO of Income Research. Randall, welcome to the show.
Hi there. Thanks.
Pleasure. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and the hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone's gotten past their security. That's where CyberLink's intrusion detection comes in. With our 24/7 security operations center, we use a combination of AI and cybersecurity technicians to see when a hacker successfully bypassed your security. So if a bad guy gets past your security, we'll know right away and be able to kick him out. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Randall, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about Income Research and your role there as CISO?
Sure. So Income Research and Management is a fixed asset firm in Boston, Massachusetts. We're about 225 employees. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer there. Been with the firm about 5 years now. And yeah, I would say if you're interested in fixed assets, look us up, incomeresearch.com.
Nice. So you actually have a really interesting path to CISO. And I actually really like this because we often get guests on we've had guys who went from truck driver to CIO, and you get the very traditional guys who come straight up the corporate ladder, through IT, up to CISO and CIO. So it's really, I love the kind of the diversity that this industry has on how people get, to the top. So if you could, would you walk us through your journey?
Sure. Yeah, it's an improbable one. And so here's what I mean. So I started, with technology. First computers that I ever used in the late 80s, right? And so those were Macs. I was a graphic designer. And so the prevailing systems then were really old school Macintosh, and CompuGraphic typesetting computers. And just to give you an idea what those were like, that was basically, amber text on a screen, and then you would commit it and it would print it to film or RC paper, right? So that was my first foray into even touching a computer professionally. Of course, played games, Hangman and such on an Apple II prior to that. But so the Macintosh comes along and the whole desktop publishing revolution. So that was how I got started with technology. And, very quickly, I was kind of the go-to guy to fix these things. First, there was one Mac and then there was another, and we need to share files. And so, built Token Ring and then Ethernet networks, mostly Apple Talk in those days, and they crashed constantly, and printing problems and all of these things, raster image processors and all this stuff. And we have more files and we need to put them somewhere, and then we need a server, and these Apple servers crash constantly. What's this NetWare thing? And the folks in the office need to process payroll and invoices. So, like rabbits, right? Computers multiply. And before you know it, you've got more of them in the building than you have human beings. And so through the 90s and up into the early 2000s, I found myself spending less and less time on my Mac designing food labeling and things of that nature, and keeping all of these systems that make the business go running and optimizing them. And I did that internally for quite a while in the printing and publishing industry. And then my job got outsourced to an MSP. so I decided I wanted to be on the other side of that equation, right? So
Mhm.
so I suddenly needed a job, right? Um, so I got a job at an MSP, and that was God in the probably 1999, right?
Yeah.
And they weren't MSPs yet. We called them, it was, technology consulting.
Consultants. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And so that was kind of you know, my first step into that space. And I wound up in that space for the next 20 to 21 years, right? And so that started as you were a field engineer or you worked a help desk in the call center and people literally called you on the phone. And we didn't even have remote access yet at that
Nope.
time. And so you did your best to help folks out. You can't see what they were seeing, so you had to try to walk them through it. Um, and so to kind of avoid burnout and such, what they would do is they'd rotate us. You'd spend, X amount, maybe a week on the help desk, and then maybe you'd go on the road for a week. And the really good techs spent most of their time on the road, right? And so, because your goal was to become an engineer, right? Rather than being a help desk technician. So, and that was cool because now you're deploying servers and switches and firewalls and all of this kind of stuff. So I became, a very good systems engineer over time. And I graduated to my next MSP. I joined as a senior engineer. And they were like, okay, it's going to be orientation and that kind of thing, and the usual paperwork stuff for the first week. Well, it didn't work out that way. I wound up on the road by noon because there was some emergency at a client, um, and so I would say, I'd have to go back and look at my resume to get exact times for you. I won't do that. I'll do my best
Yeah.
kind of off the top of my head, right? But within about 18 months, the guy who hired me, basically, who was the director of engineering at that time, he left. And so I got promoted to that role. About 6 months later, became the vice president of that MSP. Um, Eventually became the CIO of that MSP, um, and wound up running that MSP. So
Nice.
our CEO basically, he owned the company and took care of marketing and stuff like that, but handed over the reins of actually running the operation to me.
Yeah.
Um, and so the hiring and firing and documentation and all of that. And it occurred to me, there's got to be a better way to do a lot of these things, right? Rather than putting folks in cars, running them out to client sites. So that's when, started deploying hardened VPNs and, you know, we'll connect to a jump box in the environment so that we can safely get, you know, remote out to end users' desktops. You know, um, almost no one had a laptop in those days. And this
Yeah.
will probably sound, almost humorous to some folks listening, but that was the
It was the
reality of
world.
that.
Yep.
And, we were using things like VNC and
PNC. Yep.
Daytonware and things of that nature. Um, and there were no ticketing systems at that time yet either. So I had to build one. So had some SQL knowledge, and we were a Microsoft Gold partner. So we had access to lots of software. So um, it's now called Dynamics, but in those days it was just called Microsoft CRM, if you remember.
Yep.
That I built my first ticketing system using that, and
Nice.
it was highly customizable, so it could kind of do what we needed it to do. So we could at least, rather than spreadsheets and things of this nature, we now had a central place to have everyone at the company, and we could create trouble tickets and build a knowledge base and a history. Um, so, we fumbled along with that. It kind of worked. It was better than what we had. And over time, an industry kind of built up around us, right? And so the first RMM tools and ticketing systems came along, we think now things like Kaseya and ConnectWise and Lab Tech and uh, Data RMM, they over time these things built up around us, and then eventually it made more sense. Okay, these off-the-shelf products are now viable, um, and so as I moved on to my next MSP, we started implementing cybersecurity services, right? We knew how to build and deploy systems, so let's harden them.
Hmm.
And it's so I started to focus more on, network segmentation and then micro segmentation and building headless hypervisor environments and stuff like this, starting to harden the attack surface. Um, so if you're going to be successful in managed services and managed security services, you have to have repeatable and scalable processes. So, you know, standardized documentation and run books built all of these things. So that MSP slash MSSP, lots of letters there.
Yeah.
I was the COO of that organization, so actually ran that entire organization. And so um, when I came in, there was, a lot of restructuring needed to take place. So um, over time, moved most folks that were there out, moved other folks in, but built, career paths and standardized on, come in as a help desk person and, you got to build build out a um, you know capabilities matrix and use an agile framework to see, okay, what is this person's aptitude, what are they good at, and so you find you've got people who are really technical, in that they can build and troubleshoot and fix things. Maybe the security aspect they don't quite get. Some you can teach, others maybe not. But what I've found over time is that the folks that knew how to troubleshoot things, variable elimination, problem solving, these usually I was able to grow these people into my best cyber people, right? So if you know how to build a system, you've got a head start on how to harden it.
Yeah.
Right? And so over time, I eventually found my way back into working for one organization, and so I find myself now as a CISO in a financial services organization. But yeah, it was a long, kind of strange journey, right? And I had no idea. It's when I was young, I didn't say, "Oh, I want to work in technology." I thought, I like this graphic design thing, and um, but I wound up in a very different place from where I started.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was very alluring back then, the whole desktop publishing, scene. That was the future. I mean, before the internet craze, it
Yeah,
was desktop publishing was where it was at, right? I mean, it
yeah,
was all the rage.
yeah. And it's funny, the blending of those things happened is that um, as inefficient as putting technical people in cars and running them out to client sites to fix things, clients getting files to us,
Yeah.
that was also inefficient by way of, driving to,
Yep.
um, you know, first it was bulletin board systems right through.
Yep.
I had
BBS.
multiple
Yep.
dial-up modems, right? And
Hmm.
we would build a fabric of those, and then eventually we could get. First it was DSL and then T1. Uh,
Uh-huh. Yeah, for a fortune.
yeah,
You're paying $1,500 a month back then for a T1,
that's
which
right.
is 1.5 megabits per second, and you're paying
Exactly.
like an insane amount of money. In
Yeah,
today's dollars, what was that, like 5 grand a month for 1.5 megabits per second? It was
right.
insane.
Yeah, and so you'd have the folks, they would have to, compress their files and upload them, and they would error and, oh, we got your Quark document, but
Yep.
5 of your TIFF files are missing, and someone will wind up driving over with a zip cartridge
Yep.
and then a
Very
jazz,
good. Yeah.
long before we even knew USB was coming, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
this is great. Blast from the past. This is
yeah,
fantastic.
but eventually FTP and then SFTP, so people could upload their files. So yeah, that was kind of the marriage of desktop publishing and the internet, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
It was that those were fun days. And it's crazy to look back and see how far we've come. I mean, I don't it's just the technology as a whole. I mean, that whole driving, data to the, to the publisher. And I mean, just it's crazy. And now, and back then, fax machines were all the rage. That was
yeah,
so great to be able to fax a letter, to somebody great, and it,
right,
it gets there in 2 minutes versus having to send it in the mail and gets there in 2 days. It's fantastic. It's the world changing. And
right.
now, geez, now we have AI that gives you your answer in a split second.
Yeah,
And it's wild how far we've come.
yeah, for sure. And you speak of AI. I mean, I don't know if you're seeing this, but more and more I'm getting emails that are supposed to be from human beings that I have like business relationships with, and they're so obviously written by AI. I don't know if you're
That's not
seeing
you,
that yet.
Bob.
Yeah. 'Cause you can just tell like this, like
Yeah.
when I have a face-to-face conversation with this person, they don't speak anything like this.
That's hysterical. I haven't seen it yet, but I can't. I would imagine it's got to be pretty prevalent because when
Yeah.
you can just take the email, drop it into Chat GPT, get the response, and paste it back, you saved yourself what 10, 15 minutes or 20 if it was a long email, right?
Right. But they're they're tending to be extremely verbose, extremely general in nature. And so now you got to skim through it. Um, but the dark side of that is the bad guys are now using LLMs to create much better phishing emails.
Yeah.
And so our email gateways, it's like AI versus AI, right?
Yep.
And so um that's kind of the latest war being fought on that front. And then, we've got to keep tweaking our awareness training. Um, so I don't know how others do it, but what we do is so we've got our video-based training that's self-paced, X amount of assignments are required, per month. Um, but then I do also do some live training, and we'll record it as well, right?
Hmm.
Where I'll pick a topic or two and put together a slide deck so that I can really, focus in on that area.
Yeah.
And my latest one was, social engineering, and at that's a rabbit hole in and of itself. So it's like, okay,
Goes
I've
deep.
got to stick to maybe five, no more than five areas of social engineering here, right? And then just kind of define them and give them examples and some best practices. Um, so yeah, um, cybersecurity is it's never we're never done. Um, we get better, the bad guys get better,
Yep.
and unfortunately now, you know, you've got all of these ransomware and phishing as a service, affiliate programs, and for a few bucks, you can sign up and they'll generate really good targeted spear phishing campaigns for you, and do the research and get the company's logos, and yeah, so they're keeping us on our toes.
Yeah, I mean, gone are the days where it's like, oh, well, you shouldn't have clicked on it because it was broken English. I mean, it was so bad.
Right.
Now it's spectacular emails with, with very very good URLs in there that would can stump pretty much anybody
Yeah.
because they look almost perfect. And it's yeah, they have upped their game. And like you said, cybersecurity, it's a process, it's a never-ending process. The bad guys get better, we've got to get better. If you rest on your laurels, like it was funny because it's easy for us. We rewind 10, 15 years ago, and people were like, oh, it's fine. We've never been hit, we've never had a problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Why would we need to worry about it?
Right.
Now, it's I think it's been good though. I think that the ransomware that came out that became so prevalent, now it's in the general zeitgeist. Everybody is I don't know if they're hyper aware, but at least they're aware that the cyber threats are dangerous now. They can take down companies, they can ruin your reputation.
Yeah.
And so we really now have to give security some real thought and effort. And we can't just say we've been fine. Yeah, you happen to live in a bad neighborhood and you left your doors unlocked and nothing happened to you. You were lucky. But
Right.
now you're irresponsible and you're found guilty if you didn't lock your doors and bar your windows and have an alarm system. Well, that's shame on you deserve to have your stuff stolen. And now you owe people money because you didn't, secure their data properly and their information. So,
It,
yep.
exactly. I mean, one of the, one of the things that makes me, um, you know, really happy about, you know, our firm is when I first joined, um, folks weren't that focused on it, right? They're doing their jobs, which, is what we pay them to do, and we want that to be their primary focus. But, you know, there wasn't like a formal awareness training program yet. And, there were a few people who maybe were, maybe if they were a trader or a research analyst, maybe they like technology. And so maybe they watch the news and they'd hear about this thing or what have you. But now, I'll be grabbing a coffee and, someone from the trading desk will just say, you know, hey, I got this email and I just wanted you, I wanted to run this, they'll show it to me on their phone and go, and I thought this looked suspect. And to hear them actually now tell me why they thought it looked suspect. And I'm like, yeah, you're paying attention, you're learning,
Right.
right?
Yep.
They're hovering over URLs and they're like, I actually noticed, I remember that trick you taught me about Cyrillic letter swaps and things of this. And I'm like, they're listening to me.
Yeah.
This is
That's
amazing.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, and it's tough because for us, we geek out on the geeky tech stuff. We love it. It's great and it excites us and it's fun. But for the person who is, the HR specialist and they love HR and they geek out on that, the tech stuff is not exciting for them. So
Right.
it's understandably challenging. It's like us having to learn the HR stuff, like, the paperwork, I hate it. Oh, I don't want to fill out the forms. I
Right.
get it. Right. But you got to fill out the form. Right. And so now we're playing now we're that side of it. So I think it's really, challenging all the way around.
Yeah.
But I do think that people are coming around and starting to appreciate the necessity of it because the dangers are there. They're obvious, they're prevalent, and they're persistent. And so we really need to have everybody. It's a team effort now.
Yeah.
And I think that's become a really good thing as people become more aware of the cyber threats. I think on the CISO and the CIO level, I think it's really helped to get the buy-in from the whole organization that, look, this is a team effort. This is no longer like, Randall's in charge of security. So that's Randall's job. I don't care. I don't need to worry about ransomware because Randall does that, not me. I'm the CFO. I worry about money. Well,
Right.
those that day is long gone. And now the CFO is just as concerned with security as Randall is, because
Yeah.
if the CFO screws up, then the money's gone and it's the CFO who did it.
For sure. I mean, we're fortunate in that we're starting to get partnership from HR and from other, our CEO is bullish on cybersecurity. So it's not just me talking about it, right? And the fact that we're a regulated industry, that's something that non-cyber, non-technical folks at least in our organization, they understand, right? And because we're a regulated industry, these are things that we have to do.
Yep.
And so, if you're not passionate about it, you got to get passionate about it.
Yeah, well, and it really helps because the finance sector is really great in that aspect, in that nobody questions it. It's like we have to do this. Oh, cool, boom, done. And I even found, rewinding the tape back to into the 90s and the 2000s. Whenever you went back in the MSP space, you go to a business owner, you're like, well, this has to be done. Oh, great. If somebody doesn't have to make a decision because that's just what has to be done,
Yeah.
fantastic, great. But if you give them like, do you want to do this? This is good. This is the right thing to do. Or do you want to not? Well, if I don't, I save this money. If I do, I spend this money. Well, then I don't want to do it. I'll save the money and use it for something else.
Right.
But with the regulated, it's great. We have to do this. Cool. Great. Done. It's
Yeah.
not even a question. It just gets done. And I don't wish that more industries were regulated, but I wish that businesses were presented with it. This is what has to be done. And oh, okay, great. And then they just do it. And if the IT industry did that as a whole to business owners more,
Yeah.
on every level, we would be far more secure instead of being like, well, you could get you could implement this new cybersecurity, that you could have a 24/7 SOC monitoring your stuff. You could use EDR instead of antivirus. You could improve your firewall, a million things. Yeah, well, I'm not going to do any of that because that costs money. Or you have to do this just has to be done. Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah. Before I left the MSSP space, what we started doing is kind of qualifying clients, right? In that, we went from offering a menu of services to, um, you know, if I'm going to provide you with an SLA, you, here's this is the minimum baseline of what a supportable environment looks like. And so, it's not that we wanted to dictate exactly, but it's just, here's a short list of, server vendors that we're gonna support, and networking vendors, and things of that nature, right? And then, yeah, EDR is not an option, right? Because I can't provide you, if you're not gonna, it's a partnership, and if you're not gonna do your part, I can't, you can't hold my feet to the fire to support your environment if it's unsupportable, right?
Yeah, because they just want to use Windows XP still. And you're
Right.
like, yeah, I can't do that. Sorry. But
Yeah,
they're great. And I don't even want to move to Windows 7. Yeah, that ship has sailed, buddy.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Um, and so, and I do think the business community as a whole has it. Granted, I'm sure there are still some very small businesses who might be on the trailing edge of that, but I think most have gotten used to the fact is just, okay, there, we used XP, you know, I, I don't know if you saw it, but I had clients that, I mean, they were going on 15 years still using it, right?
I know.
And um that's, you know, we've all gotten used to, if we're assuming Windows, right?
Yeah.
We're going to get a new version of Windows, every handful of years now,
Yeah.
as opposed to decades.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, it's comical how people, and back then it was a different time. But it was funny how people, just grabbed on for dear life to XP and did not want to move even to 7, let alone when 8 came out. And then and it's hysterical. But those days are gone, and I'm really, it's funny because you go back to those early days, and the work was, in IT was to keep the systems working.
Yeah,
And now the systems work really well. You don't have to, you're not trying to keep the network up and like, oh, the network crashed again, and having to reboot everything and
right.
reboot your computer 6 times a day to get things working. It's the things, we've come a long way in terms of stability, and now it's more about security and efficiency, and how can we do so much more and really facilitate the operations and make them better and smarter. And it's a lot more fun now. I mean, but yeah, don't get me wrong, those were fun days back then, and it was interesting. It's just wild where we are now in comparison.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was a much younger man, um, the the exhilaration of like some catastrophic disaster where a client calling me, I just lost all my ones on our hypervisor. Oh, and and this was on a Wednesday, right? And oh, by the way, our last good backup was the previous Friday, and we're hard down, and we just sent everyone, 75 people home, and we can do nothing. Quick help,
Yeah.
right? And then being at that client site, I arrived there Wednesday, like afternoon, like just after lunchtime, maybe. Went home that Saturday
Thursday. Yeah.
morning
Saturday. Yeah,
and
exactly.
literally lived on Red Bull and
Yep.
coffee for days.
Yep.
And got them back up and running from their last backup, as I mentioned on the previous Friday, which was on DLT, mind you. Exchange servers, SQL servers, I mean their entire environment, right?
Yeah.
Because it all so yeah, we're not dealing with that stuff now. Now it's, um, you know, what's this what's this DDoS attack, from overseas or what have you, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, no, those days are, and thankfully they're gone. I remember I had a very similar. Everybody's got those stories where it was the entire operations down, and you're there, at night, and you're like, really, I cannot believe you haven't backed up in all of this time, and there's no getting it back. I mean that data's gone, it's ruined,
yeah,
and you feel bad, and you're spending hours and hours and days trying to recover data, and you're like, okay, sorry, it's gone. There's no way of you getting it back, right? The whole rate is ruined. The drives have failed. Okay, you're going to spend months waiting for the back then sending it off to a lab. It would take forever and
yeah,
cost a fortune. And
yeah,
you were lucky if they were able to do a good job. Now you're an idiot if you didn't have it backed up, and if you have to go to a lab, you're just, come on, really? It's insane. But yeah, I'm glad those days are behind us, and certainly couldn't be doing that now. The adrenaline is fun though. I mean, racing down the road to get to a client because they're having an emergency. Yeah, those were fun days. No need to race, but it was fun. The adrenaline was there.
yeah, yep, for sure.
Well, let me ask you, what with your experience and your background and everything, you deal with a lot of people now coming into the industry, and what advice would you give somebody looking to come into the industry? What's your advice to them?
So specifically cyber or just IT?
Take your pick.
So I would say either or, because I'm talking to more and more, young folks, and more. They're either generally they're they're either and they want to be software developers and code, or they want to work in cyber. There's less and less folks who are interested in things like Active Directory and understanding DNS and email and all of these things. My advice is, in general, right? Um, Work on a help desk first. Like, learn how all this stuff works, right? Now, a lot of people think, oh, the internet's been around forever. I've had cell phones since I was in middle school. I don't need to know any of that works. Well, yeah, you do. You really do, right? So learn how DNS works, and troubleshoot people's printing problems and help them with their crashed applications. Work on a help desk for a while, because it's going to be illuminating. You're going to be able to figure out, okay, am I an applications person? Am I a systems person? Am I a networking person? Am I interested in the cloud? But that's going to kind of reveal itself to you, because you're going to find what you gravitate towards and what you're really passionate about troubleshooting, and learn how those systems work. And then if you think, okay, I definitely want to go into cybersecurity, you're gonna have a great background. You're gonna understand how to harden these systems if you know how they work, right? And if you decide, okay, I think I want to be a software engineer. If you understand the basics, if you just conceptually can understand the OSI stack and some basic networking, right? It's going to really help you write better code. And or maybe you're going to be a DBA, right? But you'll understand data flow better if you have the basics under your belt. So start on a help desk. It would be my first thing. It's not beneath you, right? It's actually, I think there's a lot of honor in that because you're really getting grounded in the fundamentals. Fundamentals are important. We're not at a place where, oh, we don't need to know that. No, AI, you can ask AI for questions and it's going to, and it'll spit out answers for you, and they're going to be generalizations, and maybe they'll be helpful and they'll be a place to start. But if you actually learn variable elimination and problem solving, you can take that with you no matter where you go.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's kind of like, learning math. Like, I'll never need to learn this advanced. It's the learning, it's the thinking that's the important part.
Yeah,
That's what you're learning. You're not learning you're learning the math, but that's not what's going to be applicable in your life. It's
right.
those thinking skills. And so I totally agree with the troubleshooting, just learning how to troubleshoot properly,
Yeah,
whether it's software or hardware, a network, whatever. That process is very valuable. So I think that's sound advice.
yeah.
Randall, this has been a blast. But before we go, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about you and and your company?
Sure. So they can find me on LinkedIn. Just look for Randall Jackson, Income Research Management. Feel free to connect with me there on LinkedIn. And again, if you're interested in fixed assets, that's not my expertise. Feel free to go to our website.
Fantastic. Well, until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.